Hi and welcome back to our EV 101 course. I'm Steve with findthebestcarprice.com, and in this video we will be looking at the pros and cons of electric vehicles. What are the advantages over traditional vehicles? What are some of the disadvantages or limitations? And what are the use cases in which you should definitely consider one and some which maybe it wouldn't be quite such a good fit? We'll also look at plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, but this is all about the pros and cons of electric vehicles. So let's dive in. So let's start with the positive and the advantages of EVs. The first one would be home charging, so being able to effectively refuel your vehicle in your driveway, garage, or somewhere that is convenient to you. That can start with anything as simple as a regular household outlet, or then up to a dryer outlet to get faster charging, or something that's a dedicated install for your home EV charging. But we'll cover all of that in a future video, so just at the moment, think of it as a nice perk of being able to charge up in your home, driveway, workplace, or anywhere that's convenient to you, and wake up to all the miles you need. A second benefit would be the efficiency of electric vehicles. An EV uses roughly 80 to 90% of the energy that is put into it to propel the vehicle and get to where you're going, as compared to roughly 15 to 25% of the gasoline that you put into your vehicle going to propulsion. A lot of that is lost to waste heat, so the efficiency of an electric vehicle is a large advantage in making the most of that energy that you put into it, which is also money that is not going up in smoke. A third advantage would be fewer moving parts, which means less to go wrong and lower maintenance in general. There are some things you need to do with an EV, but if you compare the maintenance schedule of an electric vehicle to one of a traditional combustion vehicle, it looks a lot less. No oil changes, the emissions tests obviously don't come in. So in general, you have a lot less to do for an electric vehicle. The wear and tear on brakes is also less, as regenerative braking runs the motors in reverse and charges up your vehicle while you brake. So lots of advantages there on the side of efficiency and maintenance. And a fourth advantage would be a lot of the incentives put in place at a federal, state, and local level to help with everything from the purchase of the vehicle through to installing home charging and many other things that can factor in to bring down the cost of that EV. So there are many advantages of electric vehicles. Those are some of the main ones, and if you stay tuned to the course here, we'll introduce you to all of them. But let's move on to some of the cases where an EV might not be right for you. So what are some of the things that EVs don't do quite as well yet? Well, right up front, they carry a premium on the sticker price, at least in the near term. At the current moment, a comparable gasoline vehicle could be between $5,000 to $10,000 less than a EV that is similar. Now, the EV will do a lot more things in some cases, but obviously you also come with some limitations, as we'll get onto, and that can be too much to pay for some people up front. Now, over the lifetime of an electric vehicle, it does typically pay that back in fuel savings, lower maintenance costs, as we touched upon, and some of the incentives that you can get can come off quite quickly, but for the most part you will pay slightly more for an EV upfront than you will for a comparable gasoline vehicle. And second, although you do have the advantage of home charging and cutting out a gas errand, you do have to spend a little bit longer to refuel the EV on the road. As we'll get onto in future videos, there are DC fast chargers that you can get into and get in and out in 20 to 30 minutes, but obviously compared to a gasoline fill up of 5 to 10 minutes, that can take a little longer and makes your journeys a little longer on the road. Charge speeds are advancing very quickly at that fast level, but it still will take at the moment a little longer to do than it would to do that same journey in a traditional combustion car. And also related to charging, obviously we talked about home charging being a big advantage. That isn't necessarily available to everybody. People who live in built-up areas, in apartments, townhomes perhaps, where they park either on the street or in a dedicated space that doesn't have access to an outlet, that can remove the advantage of home charging and then mean you still need to go to a public charger to get that EV charged up. That isn't always necessarily a downside. There may be places close to work, close to places you go in the weekly routine that will allow you to do that, maybe sometimes even for less than it would cost to charge at home. But for the most part, that advantage of home EV charging is available only to certain groups of people. But in general, if you live in an apartment or a townhome condo situation where you won't have regular access to an outlet easily, you may want to think about how that will fit into your lifestyle and whether an EV is right for you. Another one would be remote areas. EVs have a range typically of between 200 and 300 miles at the moment. Technology is moving quickly, so that is going to push beyond 300 miles here. But for the most part, if you live in a remote area, somewhere that has less charging infrastructure, which you would clearly want to check before you jump into the electric vehicle sector, that could be a limitation. If you have home charging, it can certainly give you that 200 to 300 mile radius away from home, which can work perfectly. But there are clearly some areas where the EV charging infrastructure hasn't built out quite as much as you would like, and it might make those trips further afield to different towns that are 50, 60 miles away and beyond a little more challenging. And finally, on some of the limitations, if you live somewhere where there's a cold climate, then that will take a hit on your range, so that 200 to 300 miles and above in regular conditions, kind of above freezing, can start to take a hit. So various studies have been done on this, and they jump somewhere between 20 to 30% of lower range during colder months. That usually means around freezing and below. So if you live somewhere cold, that's something to bear in mind. Plenty of people work through it with electric vehicles. We have people in Alaska that we know have done just fine with some of the more affordable electric vehicles. Norway is a huge market, Scandinavia and Canada all have EV owners that work perfectly fine with them in cold climates, but it's something to bear in mind as you consider what your local area is like and whether an EV is right for you. So that's just a glimpse into the pros and cons of electric vehicles. There is much more to get into, down to the performance of an EV being above a lot of its comparable gasoline vehicles and combustion vehicles, over to the efficiency, maintenance schedule, the various places you can charge for free, lots of different items that put an EV in a good place to be considered at the current time and way into the future as the technology advances. But again, it's worth bearing in mind those limitations and whether they will fit into your lifestyle, whether they're something that you can begin to adapt as we move from the early adoption phase of electric vehicles into the early mainstream, or if it's something you want to sit on the sidelines for a bit longer and reconsider when the technology gets to a place that you are ready for. So hopefully that gives you an intro to the pros and cons of electric vehicles. We'll be taking much deeper dive into a lot of these topics as we move into charging in the next phase of the course, and a bunch of other topics as we move beyond. So check out the different videos in the playlist below and look at the description in this video for a link to the other advantages and limitations of electric vehicles. Thanks for watching, and you'll see you in the next course video.